It wasn't very long ago that Thanos snapped his fingers and vaporized half of existence.
I lost my brother.
And I lost half my toes.
That was a 4th of July fireworks accident.
Then why was I dressed as Spider-Man?
Because you're weird, dude.
Huh.
So in order to commemorate the apparent demise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're going back to where it all began, the ultimate line of Marvel Comics.
Back before the Iron Man, Thor, and Cap movies, but way after their first appearances in the comics.
It was the year 2000, a year that is both recent in terms of comic books and makes me feel old in terms of human existence.
And makes us all dead in dog years.
Thanos!
Marvel, in an attempt to wipe the slate clean for their decades-old characters, launched the Ultimate Comics line, reimagining their flagship franchises in an all-new continuity where everything was connected.
These new comics were bold and cinematic in their storytelling, and dealt with heavy modern themes, but most importantly, it introduced the world to the baddest mother effing super spy in the mother effing universe, Sam Jackson, Nick Fury.
Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Fantastic Four, the Ultimates.
And Ultimate Marvel Team Up.
All first issues are considered in this Ultimate Best of the Firsts.
First time meet me kind don't hurt me
Alright, so Ray, would you consider yourself a comics fan?
Of course. I mean, if I didn't consider myself a comics fan, I don't think we'd be doing any of the stuff we do at all right now. I feel like Spider-Man and everything and X-Men, and I can just go on and on, especially Batman. I mean, this is not Marvel. It's not Marvel, but we'll still... That line of comics is just going to pretty much sum me up of who I am now.
Yeah, I don't think your energy was high enough for that one. I have bled comics since I was in, I want to say middle school or something. I think my first ever exposure to a comic book, I went out to the bowling alley right here in town, and they used to have this cards and comics plays, and I remember going through this little tiny short box, and I picked out this one issue of, I want to say it was Spectacular Spider-Man, and it was one where Typhoid Mary was there, and she was standing over Spider-Man. He was all bloody and laying on the floor, and I was like, oh man, this is what comics are. And then I also picked up another issue where it's Scorpion. Another issue of Spectacular. Scorpion, like, tearing apart Spider-Man on the cover. I was like, yeah, this is what it is. And then when I came home and I showed my dad, he's just like, oh, you like comics? I'm like, yeah, I love these comics. And then he showed me a box that he gotten from someone that he used to mow lawns for. And he said, yeah, he just had these laying around, found out we had kids. And here you go, Nick. These are all yours. And then I destroyed every single one of them.
He was like, yes, son, you think you know about comics? Here, come here. Look at Daddy's treasures.
Yeah. And guess what was inside those treasures? The Clone Saga. And you know how much I loved it? I loved every second of it.
I feel like you feel like you know a superhero, like, oh yeah, I love Spider-Man, I love Superman and all this stuff. And then whenever the adults come around, like, well, let me show you this. For me, it was definitely the death of Superman. When me and my father got into an argument, and I told him, no, Superman can't die. And he kind of was like, all right, come here, I got to show you something.
So let me drop some knowledge on you, boy.
I was like, no, it's impossible. It's just kryptonite. And he was like, yeah, this is Doomsday. I did not think I did, and that's when I started getting into it. I mean, it was for me. It was before, like, I mean, Spider-Man and everything else is like the basic, principle of what you know. But for me, it was pretty much getting into like Spawn and like Grendel and Faust and like all the weird stuff.
I've never read any of those.
Yeah, they're like creepy, like looking ones. And then we got into the color guys. I wasn't allowed to go into that yet. So
it's funny that looking back, and we're doing the Ultimate line of comics right now, that one of my first major storylines that I've ever read was the Clone Saga, because the Clone Saga is one of the things that single-handedly justified the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Because this was the thing where they're like, we need to clean house. And Bill Jamis, who was the president at the time, decided that they need a line of comics that was super accessible, that they could push out to Walmart and other places like that. I think they had some in Payless shoes, from what I saw. And they just pushed them all out and they said, you know what, we're rebooting continuity, and it starts right here, which is funny too because they just tried doing that with Spider-Man Chapter 1, which John Byrne, the guy who rebooted Superman, came on and he made it so the Sandman and Norman Osborn were cousins because they had the same hair. And Dr. Octopus, the explosion that caused Dr. Octopus was the same thing that caused Spider-Man, which, I didn't see that much wrong with it.
Yeah.
But there's a whole Chapter 1 thing, and then they start up the Ultimates line, and they want Mark Bagley to draw this, and I distinctly remember him in an interview going like, you just tried this, dude, and it did not work. And then Bill Jamis was like, it's going to work this time. Well, how do you know? Because we got this guy you never heard of writing it. So this was Brian Michael Bendis' first thing that he's writing for Marvel, and they put him straight from gritty crime comics. He's writing Jinx, Torso, just people being
Jinx and Torso.
Hardcore like detective stuff, super noir, and then they're putting them on a teenage superhero type thing. And the very first thing that was released was Ultimate Spider-Man #1 under this banner.
Year 2000. I remember when this comic came out, I was really confused because we were grabbing like Web of Spider-Man and obviously the Amazing Spider-Man and getting into like all this stuff. And seeing that, like, Todd McFarlane, like, Spider-Man drawing and everything like that, of him, like, coming out the sandbox and the death of Spider-Man and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, we have this weird CG-looking comic book cover. And he was just weird-looking, like, the way he...
And it had those bars on the side, too.
Yeah,
it definitely stood out.
Oh, the bars, yes, on the comic.
You can't talk about Ultimate Marvel without talking about the bars.
Yep. And it really confused me because I remember not wanting to read it. I remember this is probably like a kid's version.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, this is the kids, like the Golden Books. This is like that version. So I don't
this
need
is the
to
Marvel age.
And then the minute I open that front cover up, whoa, what's going on here? This is a story. This is comics.
I had a similar reaction to you too. I remember seeing it because they had a couple like 4 or 5 page previews at the end of some of the comics, and I had a Marvel subscription, so it would come in, and I breezed past every single one of those because there's something about the way that it was drawn to me, and I loved Mark Bagley's art when he was on Amazing Spider-Man, but then when it got to this one, it just seemed very sterile to me when you're looking at it, and the way it was colored seemed like almost a weird mix of like saturated but not saturated enough type of thing. So it was very marketed mainstream type, and the main image that they showed on this was Peter Parker laying on the ground with a spider bite, and he's got this Say No to Cigarettes t-shirt on. And it made me think that this was just a PSA. So I just went straight past and was like, Ultimate Spider-Man, whatever. Yeah. I learned my lesson, Marvel. I've read your Chapter 1 and I know how much BS it is. But that was not the case. It actually ended up being quite the phenomenon, and it helped launch all the Marvel universe. And then even the movie started picking up the threads from this, because when Bendis came on, he specifically wanted to structure this more as a cinematic TV show than he wanted to do it as a comic book. I think it succeeded wildly and really set the tone for it.
Well, it also brought. I mean, we all grew up with Spider-Man. We already liked Spider-Man for who he was, but for him being a kid and everything like that, I think that
he was older and had a kid.
Yeah, because we watched the 90s shows and we read the comics, and that was, I think, the decision to do what they did really caught attention for a lot. Even for me, I was in 7th grade, I believe, 7th or 6th grade when I picked this comic up. And for the first time in my life, I could relate. You know what I mean? I was like, this guy's in high school. This is what's going on. And like I said, I thought this was going to be a kid's TV show, a corny little thing. And I was too grown for this. But man, was I surprised.
Yeah. So the comic starts out in Osborn Laboratories, where Osborn, he's looking at this spider that has double zeros on it. And this is the spider that they pump through with the genetic experiments and stuff. And later we'll find out that all of this has to do with that whole Captain America super soldier serum. And they're trying to replicate this over and over again. But this is like a very fresh thing. Seeing Osborn as the guy who is specifically behind the creation of the spider that gave Spider-Man his powers. So they're creating this, and then right before it cuts over to Peter Parker, you see the spider just crawl out of its jar because they forgot to put the lid on the super spider.
Of course they did. It's like one of those, where's he going to go? Like, you know where he's going to go.
No, he's crawling out. And then it cuts to Peter Parker in a food court at a mall. And he's just being harassed by Flash Thompson, the usual. But he's got this buddy with him, Kong. And I really like Kong. He's this big ape-looking guy, and he's like a typical jock. And they're just winging stuff over at Peter Parker and smashing him with hot dogs, ruining everything that he's eating, and then shouting goal, like football type of thing. And then Peter Parker, meanwhile, he's all looking googly-eyed over at Mary Jane, and then his Uncle Ben pops out of nowhere, this ponytail, hippie-looking man. Quite a departure from the doughy old guy.
You gotta love
was in the original thing.
Cool Uncle Ben.
Cool Uncle Ben.
Like, you have Uncle Ben and then you have Cool Uncle. I mean, Uncle Ben was always the cool uncle, obviously, but
yeah, I mean,
ponytail, like, oh yeah, what's up? Come here, buddy. What's going on? Everything cool?
These players harassing me.
Don't
worry about that, boo.
Don't let it get to you. Buddy.
I can't. No, that wasn't Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben sounded more like an old. I almost want to give him an old, like, Native American hippie. Don't worry, young spider.
Walking around with his little like, eagle walking stick. Yeah. Where'd you get this?
He had that
I got this from
whole
Arizona.
vibe to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you totally believe that he had a totem somewhere in his house. So like a shrine to just peace.
It's like
everything.
I think they really did a good job like bringing these like that. I mean, it just starts off instantly with like Flash Thompson, Kong, and Parker and Uncle Ben, and they did a really good job like bringing these characters down to earth. Because every time we've seen them, Uncle Ben's always been the tucked in shirt uncle. Yeah. You know, and all of a sudden we got hippie uncle, which is pretty cool. And it's just really like making them like, this is what they would look like if they were in the real world. Let's stop with this recipe of, okay, here's Uncle Ben, corny uncle. You know, he collects bottle caps. You know, no, let's
go to a Mets game.
Yeah, let's go scope out Uncle Ben. You know, and that's what you got. And it was really, I think that's a really good way of like, if you're gonna reboot it, start it all over. It like define, hey, this is the universe you're gonna be in. Mm-hmm. Realistic. You're gonna have Uncle Ben. This is gonna be Uncle Ben when you look to your left or right at that mall. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then even jumping off of this one too, as much heat as the Marvel got for making Aunt May hot in Homecoming with Marissa Tomei, this one was the first one to significantly de-age her. Now she was far from like super hot Aunt May. But she was better looking than old doting Aunt May, a little wheat cakes lady. Yeah, we had Aunt May who, hey Parker, how you doing? Hey, come in. You know. Now I married an octopus man. Yeah, not anymore. I was really confused. I'm not gonna lie. When I saw Aunt May, I mean, come on. Every time you saw Aunt May, it was like poor little Aunt May. She looked pretty cool. She made some macadamia nut cookies. Yeah. Now here it was like, no, this is May. She's tough. Yeah. And they had a really good relationship too. Like at the end where Peter Parker kind of freaks out at them. This is after he gets his powers. We're jumping forward a little bit. We might not do like a whole summary for each one of these because we got quite a bit and we want to keep it to a little. We can be here forever talking about this. But the relationship between Aunt May and Ben, where Ben is the one who's like, you get up to your room, stop talking to us like that. And then as soon as they get up there and they're like, he's going to come out from this. I'm like, yeah, he's going to come out from this. It was a very realistic relationship that you see and very paternal, where they know that this is just a phase and this is their boy. He's not doing anything. They're not going to make a huge dramatic scene about this. They just need to make sure he's punished for this. Now that I think about it, I wonder what people who grew up with, when we saw it, we were already only about a few years into it. But talking about people who have been 20 years into it, I wonder what their thoughts on it was. You know what I mean? Like, wow, this is actually what I go through with my kid. Holy crap! I am. Oh my God! I'm Ben Parker. You know, that realization, I'm Ben Parker, I'm Aunt May. That was an actual scene from real life, too. And another thing that Bendis really brought to this as well, and we're jumping back to the mall scene, is that the whole time Peter Parker's sitting there, it's completely quiet on Peter Parker's side. There are no thought bubbles. In fact, there were no thought bubbles in any of the Marvel comics. But in order to fill the space, there was conversation that was going around it. Mm-hmm. So you'd hear the conversations from the different areas of the food court, depending on which perspective it was shifted to. So in terms of world building and making everything seem like it fit in the same world, that was major for me at that time. Because up until then, hearing a straight conversation, it was just a one or two bubble thing.
but this really drew it out and helped drive home the tension.
I think they knew they wanted to eliminate the thought bubble because, like, if you read the old comics, that's my trouble of reading like the older stuff. Sometimes
I'm just gonna exposition dump every single thing I'm thinking.
Exactly. So I think they really wanted to get rid of that.
Here's my evil
and it
plan.
worked out. And then when he does, I mean, now I'm jumping forward a little bit, but when he does end up talking to himself, trying to figure out this whole Spider-Man business, it's not as like crowded. You know, we have enough time to appreciate the art, appreciate the surroundings, and also, like you were saying before, how like the people are talking in the background, it just sets up the world for you. You know, you're sitting down, you are Peter Parker. All the people who are picking this up, you are in high school, you're trying to figure out what's going on, you're getting picked on.
It definitely did a really good job of putting me there. And one thing, too, was the relationship between him and Harry Osborn.
And yeah, him and Harry.
Where it was just like he was the guy that he was cheating of them with homework, and he was very diplomatic about this, too. He was like, I can't completely keep them off of you because I've got an image to keep up.
Yeah.
But I'll help you out, Pete, if you just do my homework for me.
It was like douchey, but not really good sense of friendship.
Yeah, he was a standard politician. Yeah. Like you would know that he would grow up to be a senator someday.
Yeah, exactly.
If he didn't turn into this like, orange amorphous goblin thing.
Yeah, seeing the whole like growing up like with the '90s show and reading the comics, the whole Harry Peter thing never really hit me. As like I know they were best friends because the show tells you that they're best friends. And the comic tells you that. But here it was like, all right, I can see like they're friends, and I see he has an image to keep. Like you feel it, you know what I mean? Like I feel like after this, any other character who was in it, you actually like felt what was going on, the relationship between this person. Like, okay, he keeps Aunt May and Ben Parker, Uncle Ben, high up here, and Harry Osborn a little bit to the back. You know, like you can set the tone for it and feel like how important these characters are going to be in the towards the end and towards wherever the story is going to take place.
Yeah, and as far as departures from the main cinematic, like the main comics universe, that area of gray that we have as far as like cliques and as far as friendships and different alliances, that was really impressive because it's just not every day that you see in a comic, especially at that time when John Byrne and Howard Mackie were taking over the main Spider-Man stuff. It was, you're a good guy, you're a bad guy type of thing. Yeah. You're all in and you're all out. And then that shades of gray really brought it in. So as they go through high school, Peter Parker's being picked on a lot. He's very wimpy, doesn't have that many abilities. And then Harry Osborn's like, hey, Dad, don't forget, I've got my class coming in. So just giving you a heads up, they can tour the facility. And then Norman Osborn, and classic just bad father.
Yeah.
Which is like, Martha? Who told this kid to come into my office? When did I agree to this? He was like, you totally agreed to it, Dad. Yeah. He was like, get out of here, you wimp. So he's kicking Harry aside big time. You can see what kind of crazy person or just like neglectful, spiteful, self-absorbed person Norman Osborn is just from this interaction with his son, which is not something I think we saw in the original ones.
No.
And that was very much more pronounced that this guy is just douchey from the get-go. And he turns even douchier after his spider gets out and bites Peter Parker. And he's just like, we really can't afford the liability, so let's just kill this kid. Which, when they go to run him over, he does a backflip straight over the car. And then that completely blows everyone's mind. And then Norman Osborn, in his infinite wisdom, says, maybe you just want to keep an eye on this kid, because I think this spider did something special to him.
And we're all in the background like, we know who you are. We know why you're evil.
You know why that shade of green is on your face.
Exactly. Norman, I kind of like Norman Osborn a lot more in this one. I mean,
he had a great character.
Like, we knew he was going to be, and I think they did it really well, because you already knew, once you hear the words Norman Osborn, you're like, Green Goblin. Like, you already know. And establishing that whole, like, coldness to it just makes it even more like, wow, this is how he is pre? Can you imagine afterwards?
And they also really stress his company, too, which is something that we always saw looming in the background in the regular comics. But then you got to see him as the businessman making these decisions, and that he was always just a jerk before he became the Goblin. And that was just an extension of his mindset at the time.
Like, that was his inner demon.
And if there's
his inner goblin, if you will.
And if there's one character that I think Bendis writes better than almost anything, and this is extending over into the Marvel Universe, is every time he touches Norman Osborn, I feel like he just has such a knack for that. So I love going back and reading anything that he writes with Norman Osborn, be it this or the Dark Avengers, where he takes on the role as Iron Patriot.
I love Norman Osborn's character in this universe. I'm just gonna, I love it. Like, this is, before I didn't care. Like, my favorite, like, back in the day, my favorite villain was, like, Venom's not really a villain, but, like, I like Kingpin and all of them, you know? But, like, after reading the Ultimate and seeing, like, Norman Osborn and trying to jump ahead, but, like, he became, like, one of my favorite, like, characters. Not Goblin, not Patriot, like, Norman Osborn. Him himself. Oh, he was like the Kingpin before Kingpin a little bit.
At the end of after he hops over the car, and then we kind of go to it. He has that altercation with Aunt May and Uncle Ben because he's starting to like pass out in school, and then like all the kids.
You don't understand. Leave me alone.
Yeah, you don't understand. I'm going up to my room, and I'm gonna climb the ceiling.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm going to my room and turn into a superhero.
So he climbs up the ceiling. He's hanging off of it, and it just ends on this note where I think he says "very cool."
Yeah, like he's like that look.
This is awesome. Just that look of wonder. And Mark Bagley, this wasn't his best work on this, and I don't know if it's just like the inking or the coloring or what, but he definitely, you can see him start coming along to the idea as he goes, and he's just like, you know what, this is pretty cool, and he starts putting a lot more emotion into it, and he's really good with the facial.
It kind of looks like a standard comic in the beginning, and like you were saying, when it comes to the backflip, and then like when he's crawling on the wall, you can see that he was like, whoa, look at these shapes. These shapes, I mean, you think about it, you're like, oh, this guy's going to climb different, he's going to be in different positions, and I love, like later on, I mean, I know we're talking about the first, but I just love, the reason why I love Ultimate Spider-Man so much is because of the positions and the art. That really transitioned, as an artist too, that's what got me wanting to draw Spider-Man. Yeah. So you can see him getting better and better, like figuring out what they want to do, like towards the end of it.
So yeah, it's when we're looking at this as a whole package, any negatives that you have that stick out to you?
Probably, like, I mean, there were some like different, like with the like not the tone, but like the color, like how we were just talking, like the ink, like comic wise before story wise, like some of the tone just didn't pick up with me what was going on. Like, not to say that it was too colorful, but I didn't feel like this sense of like worry that they're trying to pick up on until after he tried to kill Peter Parker, where like the inking kind of changed, like we were talking about, like he finally figured out the art style. And I can understand too, because it's the first run, so like the beginning they probably were like, this is just the story, everyone knows the story of Peter Parker. And then once they got towards the, you know what, we can actually bring some emotion out with these colors. And I noticed that like the last 4 pages were really, really, really detailed, but the first few were just kind of like, here's a comic book, like it was like a mini story, you know, like you get like a 2-page comic about what's going on in a different scenario, and you kind of got that in the beginning of this.
Yeah, there were a lot of backgrounds that were missing earlier on, and I think that's the thing that kind of got me the most, thinking it was like more of a PSA type of thing, because no one commissioned this guy to write the backgrounds. It was just a straight color that was put like yellow or something in the back, but then he started filling it in,
and I think
getting that Bagley detail into it.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people, like, it's hard to take serious, you know, like this is your first line, you want to establish that this is a reboot, you know, and it's hard to take that seriously. I think that's what hurts the comic a little bit, is that if I gave it to a buddy who was like, you never read Ultimate Spider-Man, and like I was telling you, I gave it to my brother, you know, I have the first issue, and hey man, read this, and he looks at it like, this doesn't look as, I don't think I want to be delved in until you actually read it and get into it. And it took a while for people to like actually start picking it up, for one person to say, hey, it's good, read it, you know. And I think that's what hurts it a little bit. But if you obviously if you delve into it with the conversations and everything,
and you know, I definitely feel like that's one of the things that when we talk about comic books, that's the creative team finding their stride with one another. That's going to be a struggle that kind of is pervasive throughout the whole thing,
especially with them being the firsts. Like,
and this was the first one that came onto it, and they came out with a bang, and they really set up a lot of stuff. And all these threads that we see with Norman Osborn, they will be picked up on later on in the different series as they go too. So
it definitely was like open-ended.
When it kind of, I don't think it said in this one it's all connected. It was probably a different one where it said it's all connected, but everything in here is connected to everything else in the universe. So with that being said, we're going to go on to the second one that we got in, which is Ultimate X-Men #1. So Ray, you want to go ahead and tell us, what was this comic about?
So Ultimate X-Men is pretty much resetting the same thing, resetting everything that we know about X-Men and putting in we start off with the Sentinels coming down and everything like that, which is
was brutal.
Yeah, that was intense.
That was really jarring just to see go from Spider-Man where it's just like they're setting it up and there's a murder attempt on this kid that's really cold-blooded. Mm-hmm. But then you see giant robots coming down and just vaporizing.
So there was a definite tone shift between Ultimate Spider-Man and going into this Ultimate X-Men. I didn't expect that brutality. Yeah,
there were just bones crushed. There's the Sentinel will just come down and in the middle of a street just destroy. And there's viscera just all over the place, which is not something that you would expect to see, especially as like a hailed, this is a really good way to take him out. And,
especially to start off.
Yeah, and to start off. And human beings in the street just watching these mutants get vaporized, and they were kind of okay with it too.
Because growing up, I always thought it was just kind of like a doofy thing. Like, oh, hey, you're a mutant, let's fight, like a realization.
Guys were a real threat. And the thing that really stood out to me too is this was released before 9/11. And this here, to me, reads as a really perfect, a metaphor for the Patriot Act and everything. Mm-hmm. How it justified the government going and doing, acts against humanity and stuff like that. And just these big, sweeping military government procedures that affected and destroyed lives and just have national support almost behind it because they were mutants and because Magneto bombed. What was it? I think they said New York and Washington again, which is where'd the planes land? The World Trade Center, the Pentagon. So this was almost prophetic too when you're reading it, and it's so easy to think like this is a reaction to 9/11. When no, this was building up before 9/11 as well, so it kind of puts you in that political mindset.
What's scary is it gives you that sense of what would happen if this was real, if Magneto and all the mutants had to revolt against the government. I mean, it's scary. I mean, when I was reading it, it's just fear. It really defines the fear between putting you in that mutant point of view.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think about the mutants that were introduced in this one? How they were introduced?
All I have to say is Hank McCoy.
Hank McCoy killed it.
Hank McCoy.
My boy Beast.
My favorite introduction by far. When I think of the introductions in this comic book, that I always liked Beast. Mm-hmm. But I always thought without the blue fur, he would be lame.
And he was a stupid little furless ape man in this.
And he was just so damn cool.
He was awesome. So this backwoods... I don't want to say backwoods. It was kind of backwards thinking, I think. Bargoer, he notices him and says, so you see what they did to them mutants, you freak? When you going to get vaporized? And then Hank McCoy, I think he goes to beat Hank McCoy with a pool cue.
Yep.
And then he does this really cool flip
over it. And then they look at him where is he? And they look up. And there he is, right on the ceiling. Looking.
And he's just stomping ass in this. And then when he leaves, the bartender shouts something at him that was just... not really friendly. It was not inviting. And then McCoy, his retort back to him was just he flips a quarter, back into the thing, which, it's corny. It's a very cliche thing, but he also said, it's a good thing I didn't flush the toilet when I
went. I was like, holy crap. This Beast is going to be awesome. Oh, well, Hank McCoy, not Beast yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
He's Hank McCoy. He actually was given the name Beast. It's kind of like a slave name type of thing where when they finally get introduced to Professor X, he says, no, you're going to have to choose code names because we're not doing any of this slave name stuff. So who are you going to be? And I think they even give him the name Beast, and he's just well, I don't think that's the most...
You're
I don't think that's going to keep people from hating me.
He's really? Is that what you want to go with that? I like the reactions, too, that they gave him when it's this is your code name. Why don't you go with this? And Professor's kind of I guess you're this. It's kind of you flip. You're an animal. Okay, you're a beast. You, what do? You lift things. You'll be Colossus. You, and what do you?
What are you, Russian?
Yeah, what are you, Russian?
Are you a Ruski? Get off my soil. Also, you're Colossus. Was a Colossus within the middle of an arms deal, too.
Colossus' introduction was pretty cool. It was
pretty cool.
I thought it was pretty Agent 0070. Like,
Yeah, he was on like this mission to. It was some kind of like a weapons bust.
Yeah, he was trying to get like he was undercover, and once they had like the whole intruder and someone's like telling we've been compromised kind of deal going on, and the introduction was pretty cool with the helicopter like coming down, and then like all of a sudden the fire comes through and he's like half silver, like with the thing when the clothes are ripping off.
That was the big Mark Miller action scenes that he has to put in through everything.
I was kind of like, okay, X-Men, we'll see where you're going here.
Yep. And then we had Jean Grey walking around. She's the one kind of recruiting everybody and bringing them back together. Mm-hmm. And she's played off really well in this one. But there's something that goes on, and I found this in a lot of the Ultimate comics when I was younger, and especially going back now, is they have this turn of the millennium style that is every girl has to wear a crop top.
We have to show the belly button.
We have to show that, not even the belly button, but up to the underboob. Yeah. Like, it is cutting really, really deep, and it goes straight up there, so you can see her entire stomach. And that's, whatever you can make a case for, they're just over sexualizing, or hey, she was just being a rebellious teenager. But then they introduced the purpose of the costumes, which was, hey, this costume is a membrane that stops the Sentinels from recognizing that you're a mutant. And the only difference, my only problem with that is that Jean Grey, Storm, they're wearing what's like a long bikini.
I think there was like, put this on. You need this. It was like, wait, you mean we gotta wear this?
Will this protect me? I will totally
Wait, hold on 1 second.
You.
Snip, 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 snip. Yes, put this on. You need it. This is all we got.
Wait, it's not protecting you enough. I think I need to snip, 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 snip. There we go. Now I can see more of your arms too.
It was a kind of corny but kind of cool little. Well, this is what these uniforms do. But like you said, when they have that one shot and Cyclops is looking over at them and they're all in the new outfits, they look cool up until you get to the left side, and then all of a sudden you see that.
Yeah, I didn't care too much for the costumes. They were very much based off of the movie.
Yeah,
costumes,
like silver and.
Yeah, it was bland. It was black.
I think it was kind. I mean, they're trying to go with the old look, but. I don't think they really hit that really well on
I think they tried to modernize that a little too much with it. So, another character that was introduced, we have Storm.
Storm was brought when
who was another one?
She was in jail.
She was in prison.
Yeah, and Jean busted her out, which is pretty cool. I mean, she was using her powers on the security guard and grabbed the
keys. She leaned over and she's like, even though I'm a little girl talking to you right now, I'm a hot little something. You're going to see me as one of your superiors because I've got these powers.
For the longest, I thought she was rogue for a while. Just the way she was acting, because, I mean, Jean was very,
She never said shug. Yeah. She never said y'all. How could you think that's rogue?
Well, I'm just saying, like, she was not acting like the Jean I knew.
Yeah.
So reading this,
she was very assertive.
I was like, Jean, are you allowed to do this? Is this okay? Like,
you're supposed to be really shy, Jean.
Is this good?
Yeah. So I actually have a problem with the whole this issue. It sets up everything. I think the introduction with the Sentinels and doing all that stuff, but then after that, it kind of turns into a tour. Like you're on a guided tour where it flips to a video of Magneto just like talking and laying out his plan, exposition,
Mandarin
which is like one of the things that Mark Miller really struggles with in a lot is that he just has these awesome plots with these big Michael Bay set pieces. And then he's just like, exposition. I got to say something cool here. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that. And then when Jean Grey, she's like, I'm a hot little something, but you're going to see me as this. That's very much standard Mark Miller exposition setting up and getting you into the character.
There's a lot of jumping around.
But it's very much a Jean Grey goes here, collects this person, Jean Grey goes here, collects this person, Jean Grey goes here, collects this person. Then we run into Cyclops, who's like really almost like militant, which is a cool look on him.
Yeah.
I like militant Cyclops. And then from there, they run into like Grant Morrison, Professor X.
Grant Morrison,
where he's just like, I'm just reading the author's minds as they're writing their books. That's the most important ideas as we get from that. And then he sends them off to go rescue Bobby Drake in this really cool action sequence that showcases a lot of the different characters' powers, and they get Bobby Drake, who's like a 15-year-old kid in this one, and they bring him back. And then all the way at the end, we've got Magneto holding someone accountable for, you failed me. How did this happen? And then he just says standard Mark Miller plot device type of stuff. Just like, I didn't bring you here so you can apologize. I brought you here so I can kill you and make an example of you. Then he shoots him. But the best surprise of the whole thing is when you find out that Wolverine's introduction, he's really an assassin just working for him. So even though it had a lot of faults with it, I think as far as like pacing and structure, and I feel like being too Miller extreme, they did have decent enough characterizations, and that Wolverine at the end was a really strong cliffhanger that wanted me to continue reading that, even though I had my misgivings with the art style.
I think the challenge they faced was that this is going to be a new X-Men, so they didn't really have to do anything with like the characters because that was kind of like already thrown into it, but the changing of the settings for all the other people. Like they're like, okay, well here's the team, here's this, but they kind of speak for themselves. You know, Jean speaks for herself. Hank speaks for himself.
You can say they speak for themselves a little too much.
Yeah.
A little too loudly and a little too enunciated.
Well, it goes back to the whole speech bubble thing of like when they were like getting rid of like all those like extra talk and stuff. But then
Mark Miller's idea was just, hey, how about I just have them say everything I would have put in a thought bubble?
Let them talk about everything. And it was cool. I mean, it's X-Men. I mean, that's what it is. It's corny. They're gonna talk. Even if you watch the old read the old comics, they're gonna like speak everything on their mind. So it was, I mean, I like this comic. I don't hate it, but it's also, it does make you want to go deeper into it.
You mean you didn't groan when the Sentinel picked up Cyclops and he was talking to the... I mean, not the Sentinel. He started talking to the Sentinel. He's just like, I bet you think that the only way for me to shoot this I-beam is to put my finger up on my visor and touch it. No, I've got one in my hand, bitch.
Yeah. I was like, why don't you just do it?
Just do it. He's a robot. Why are you talking?
I wish there was like a point of view, like where he keeps talking, like he's like, yeah, blah blah blah, and Sentinel just goes back and just like,
what if they just make Colossus the crazy, just really pompous, always talking about everything, and everyone's just rolling their eyes at him? But that wouldn't work in this world because everyone is doing that exact same thing, except for Beast, who I thought was just really natural and cool.
You would think Beast would be the most like talkative, but no, we got a lot of Cyclops. So like you said, all militant, trying to be, hey, I've been doing this, I'm good, we got this.
What'd you think of the art style?
Loved it.
Loved it?
I like it. I guess loved it was too much. Comparing it to other ones, but that art style was pretty cool. I think everything was shiny. Like
everything was shiny. This is the one that I think that, because digital coloring was still really new, and when we talked about Ultimate Spider-Man, we saw that it was kind of plain looking as far as the colors go, and this one was super saturated.
Like when you say art style, I'm thinking about like the body tones. And
I'm going to talk about that too.
That's cool, but color-wise, everything was just super shiny. Like even
super shiny and super dark.
Yeah, even Hank in the bar, his little bandana he was wearing. Like what is that made out of? It was just super reflective all of a sudden. It looked like it was like, oh yeah, but that material that he's been wearing on his head this whole time, we made all your super suits out of that because it looks pretty good in the sunlight. Like just everything didn't, like the clothes and everything.
Yeah, I kind of felt that the art style was a little too angular and exaggerated for me. And the style of clothing that they were wearing.
It was really good looking when the Sentinels are coming down, like the way the fire looked and the way the
once the action starts.
Yeah, it looked really good. But once they had like those still, like when Cyclops is looking at all of them and talking like, these are your outfits. It just looked like they had a background and they colored over the background and just kept like the shining of the uniforms in one palette.
Yeah.
So
hey kids, do you like X-Men to the extreme?
Yeah. I feel like they were like toys. I mean, that's where they're gonna go.
Yeah, they're super violent toys.
Yeah, so I think that's why they made them. Maybe that's why they made them shiny. This is the new version.
The Magneto with the power to pull pacemakers out of people's chests. Cool scene. And then it was ruined by Miller's dialogue.
Yeah, I was like, oh, stop talking.
All right, so that one's down. We got Ultimate X-Men. Now, the third one that was released was Ultimate Marvel Team Up. What'd you think of this one?
So the next one is the Ultimate. And,
no, we're not gonna. So we need to at least say something about this one because we said all first issues will be considered, and this one wasn't really the launch of a big flagship, but this one's just the meeting between Wolverine and Spider-Man, and that's all I need to say about that. All right, now we got to move on. It was good. It was cute.
It was
cute.
It was a nice little intermission. How about that?
All right. Now the next one, The Ultimates, number 1.
Oh man.
Did your heart flutter when you saw Steve Rogers for the first time in this?
I never ever was a Captain America fan.
He kicked ass in this.
Until The Ultimates. And I tell that to everyone. I was never a Captain America fan until The Ultimates. He was kind of... And, man...
He was like the tough guy. He was the Clint Eastwood character. He came in, kicked ass, took names, and Bucky was his war photographer that followed him around.
It just made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for this guy to come from this era, to come into this new era, and be that way. And that's one of the things that gripes me is that how can you be that corny and then come into the news and just be like, yeah, whatever. And then they were like, no. If Clint Eastwood was Captain America, got frozen, he would treat the team like this, and he would be this person.
And we never really see the team in this one. The team doesn't come together at the end of the arc.
But we already get that.
As an introduction to this sets up so much, and it gives me the best Captain America I think I've ever seen up to that point. Couple things that really jumped out to me with this is like they're on a mission to take down this Nazi Hydra base that's about to launch a nuke at the United States, and Captain America is just not having it. And then the best part about this is that when we come in, the first character we see is Bucky Barnes, who's his war photographer. It's kind of set up where he's just kind of like following him around, and it's almost, you get the feel that everyone around him just views them as propagandists. Like, oh, you're here, you're our mascot. You're just taking pictures of our mascot. And he's like, well, in all these tours that he's done, Cap's never lost an army. He's like, yeah, whatever. And they go down and they storm the beaches and paratroopers, and there's parachutes all over the place. And they're starting down there like, where's your Captain America now? Because he's nowhere on the ground. No, because that son of a bitch is about to fly an airplane straight through the fortress. Bucky's gets back to him and he says, it's impregnable. You can't get through this. And he's like, there's no such animal. He hops in the cockpit and rams it straight through it and busts it up. And the art style of Brian Hitch is the first time I've ever seen any Brian Hitch art. And the way it was colored, too, it kind of did away with all this oversaturation that we were talking about. And everything just worked. And it felt so cinematic.
Dark, gritty.
The pages on the outside, they were not like white bars. Everything was black on the outside. So it looked like you were reading a widescreen movie. And that's how everything flowed. And everything was so photorealistic. And all the details in the background. So many lines that Brian Hitch put into this thing. And it felt like they were actually storming the beaches. They were in these airplanes. That they actually wore these military combat fatigues. Like, everything to the letter was down perfect with it.
Well, because at that point, all you saw was, like, Captain America with, like, dudes in green uniform. You didn't, like, get the realization of it. And bringing that's what, it just sets the comic up, the tone, dark. This isn't your grandma's Avengers,
Yep. And then Cap, one of my favorite one-liners from this, when he comes in and he breaks the whole thing down. He comes out storming with his shield up and is like, what are you waiting for, ladies? Christmas?
The Christmas line. What are you waiting for? I think that was one of the best pictures in the whole comic. I feel like that's like that's most memorable. That line alone is like, okay, you're telling me I'm not tough, but you're over here waiting to.
He's like the most maximus machismoist mothers as ever existed, right? And then when they break into the actual setup and they're going through it, and then they start seeding the idea that this was like Chitauri tech, the aliens that appeared in the Avengers movie, like they were conspiring with the Nazis to overthrow the United States. Like they had their hands in everything, like way longer than anyone ever knew it. So this is truly where this whole universe starts, is this Captain America and Ultimates #1, and they set up the whole plot line where the aliens are coming back and they're like kind of quasi Skrulls and stuff like that. So you get that window into it and you know just enough. But I didn't even know that stuff was there until I went back and reread, and it was smacking me in the face like, oh man, they seeded everything right here in this first issue.
I know for me, I felt like for them to like jump into that writing and everything is like on the verge of like mystery, it kept you on your seats, and that's what you're not just reading because for me, I'm waiting. All right, Cap's gonna do this and he's gonna get frozen, whatever. But it was like more and more and more, and they fed you more and more to add on to the story later.
Yep.
And you just if we just put the issue just alone without going to the next volume, leaving that like sense of like what's going on just really gets you to turn that page and pick. That's what grabs you to go get a comic the next week, you know.
And then when he blows up in the sky and he falls down into the, it's just beautiful how it's. I think it's just like
the
you zoom in just a little
everything.
bit as he's coming down and he hits the water, and then it cuts over to Tony Stark on Mount Everest, and beautiful Mount Everest. This blew my mind that this could be on a comics page. How everything was. It's like they're nailing the digital art. Everything is just so picture perfect. And Tony Stark comes up and he's going through Mount Everest. I think he's on a business trip. He says he's on. Trip. And then the Mark Millar dialogue starts coming out a little bit more, and you find out that Jarvis is a slime ball that's been like stealing from the company just in like side conversation. But it doesn't matter. Set up that whole like almost Robert Downey Jr.-esque interpretation of Iron Man being like just a savvy, quick talking business guy type of thing.
We did say that this is what set up the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
and this was the one that really, really brought it home most. So overall, any positives, negatives, nitpicks that you can make for this?
I love the art style, like we were just talking about, and it really, I feel like seeing them with the way they're drawn, like cheekbones. I mean, just to get into detail
and how cumbersome a lot of their uniforms were.
It just brings you to a realization that these guys can be in this universe, and I feel like that was always the thing where it's like, yeah, Batman can't exist in the for real, and this person can't exist for real, but like then you get the Ultimates, and it's like this is Cap. Like if Captain America was the SHIELD super soldier guy in World War II, this is what he would have gone through. And the same, even with Tony Stark, it's just a realization of it. Like they always look like they were like non-real, like not realistic. You know what I mean? And this was like the first comment was like, no, this is down to earth. This is the Ultimates.
Yeah,
like quick, simple like that. The coloring, I mean, obviously with the tone of it, just matches the tone. You know?
And when it needs to be dark, when it's in
like you were saying
about, it's super dark,
and then like all of a sudden with the explosions, it's super bright. And it makes
and then when you get to Everest, it's
super.
It's
bright.
like when you turn that page to see Mount Everest, it's the same effect when you're sitting in the movie theater, and all of a sudden this dark screen goes to like white.
Like I think
my eyes had that same effect on.
They really were figuring it out and did a really good job on it. You know, and all the characters are just.
And there weren't even that many characters in it.
No, it didn't.
They just nailed the characters that they needed to nail. And this was like, I feel like Mark Millar getting more comfortable with himself. Yeah. Whereas before in Ultimate X-Men, he has to be super extreme and say the coolest stuff ever. And he still said the coolest stuff ever. But I almost feel like Brian Hitch, just him putting so much detail into it, he's just like, oh, maybe I don't have to say a lot of this stuff. And it really benefited from it.
I feel like the Ultimate X-Men was his... Yeah, here you go, company. This is your comic book that you want. And then he goes home. He's like, let me work on my woodwork, which is the ultimate. You know, just do what he has to do, and
just carving himself a really masculine Captain America.
And then like the kind of, I don't want to say the faults of it are not from what I experienced, but what I've heard like other people like who were in the comic game longer than me was them getting used to that tone shift. They weren't. I don't think they were ready for that tone shift at the time.
I was there.
I mean, we were all like, yeah, you know. But I know there's a lot of people who I've talked to, like in comic book shops, who at first they weren't ready for it. So they feel like when that tone shift came, they didn't really like pick it up. Apparently, I mean, this is like me talking about other people, like you know.
Do these people exist? Are they real people?
Now they don't, because they're all Marvel Cinematic fans. So they're like, oh yeah, Ultimates, yeah. But I remember being in a.
Could you imagine if Chris Evans was this Captain America?
He
was just good old prayer boy, which he is in the movies. But he's kind of lacking that Captain America like gruff edge to him.
To put that gruff edge on him in the movie, it's just more like
But I think it would take away some likability for a lot of people. I don't think he would have been able to carry a whole series.
When
by
he
himself,
does get into that, you take him a little more seriously. But not to jump into the movies, but just hearing a lot of people like the older, like this is like the older generation. I mean, I'm sorry for anyone out there who's like, I'm that generation, but.
My Captain America had a helmet with wings painted straight on it.
Like it was. I was about 17 when I was talking about the Ultimates with this guy in the comic book shop, and his gripe about it was, and some of other people was that just a tone shift for them. It just took a while for them to get into it. They didn't think it was going to last long. And I can understand that. You've grown up with this brightly colored Star-Spangled Man, and now you're seeing the real... But I'm like, think about it, though. This is the realization of war. This is the one we want. This is what I would think, you know? But I don't want to put that as a negative, but, I mean, overall, I love this comic.
I can't think of many negatives whatsoever. The only thing I could say is, like, over-expository Tony Stark when he gets there. And that's not even a negative, because he was only in there for 2 pages.
And it's Tony Stark, so...
It's Tony Stark. He's supposed to be really pumped. You can write that off as totally within character for him just to verbalize every single achievement he's ever made. Just like, yeah, I'm just going to call out Jarvis for being a scumbag. Whatever. I know it, guys. Yeah, you can be a scumbag to me, too, but just know I control everything.
Anybody else doing that, it wouldn't make sense, but...
So now... We're going to go into the last one that we had. The last flagship one that was released was Ultimate Fantastic Four #1. And this one was actually written by a team of Brian Michael Bendis, writer of Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Marvel Team-Up, and Mark Millar, writer of Ultimate X-Men and Ultimates. And when they came together, I think it was Miller did the plots, and then Bendis did all the dialogue. And for all the faults I have with Mark Millar doing dialogue, but I think his plots are amazing, then you put that in here, and then you see Bendis with his dialogue coming in and putting that over top of it. It was just a really strong marriage. I remember being at the comic book store first day. I think it was before this even opened up. The Regal had a comic book store next to it. So on my way to go see a movie, I went straight over into that, and I waited for it to open up so I can grab my first issue because I could not wait for this. Fantastic Four, full disclosure, one of my favorite comic book franchises. And that is almost solely because I started reading them at the time Mark Waid and Mike Ringo were writing it. It was one of the most magical runs, and it really opened up a lot of possibilities. And even the Marvel Knights one where they came with Gary Sacasa, where he somehow bankrupted the Baxter building. That was a cool storyline to me too. And I loved these characters, and I could not wait to see what they would do to them in the Ultimate universe. And it did not disappoint in the least. So Ray, what are your thoughts on this?
So for the longest time, Fantastic Four was wasn't the mainstream people that I would go straight to. So when the Ultimate one came out, because of everything else that had been going so good in my life, I decided to pick it up. And that's the first time that I was like, whoa, holy crap, Fantastic Four, this is cool. I mean, can't get much wrong with 4 people with superpowers. Yeah. But the way this one took it in that direction, and overall just changing the tone, like setting up, I mean, I'm just going to jump a little bit, but when you have Reed and seeing him like growing up, and then Ben Grimm helping him get out of that situation where they're like picking on him and everything, you already established that connection, this friendship. And I hadn't seen it, like, the whole time I always thought it was like, yeah, we're friends. Like, yeah, of course, everyone knows they're friends, but...
He flies my plane.
Yeah. It's like, that's the first time that I see him, you know, like...
You see him looking out for him and everything.
Like, at that age, you know? To me, growing up, like I said, I wasn't a big Fantastic Four fan until the Ultimates and afterwards, but I was like, wait a minute, no wonder he always wants to fix him. I just thought he was like, I just want to fix him because he's not supposed to have rocks on him. Yeah. But like, it just gives
He's a big freak man who can't have sexual relations.
I want to fix him, but this one, like, you know, they're best friends, then the meeting up later on, and like... his father, and like, no, you can't, what are you doing, you're messing up all the gizmos in my shop, and like, I want to do this. And I fell in love with Reed Richards. Reed Richards, he was really good. And I made the realization as I was reading this, because I read this not too long after reading Ultimate Spider-Man. This story took that Spider-Man origin and then turned it from a really loving hippie family into this dad that just did not care about him. Both of them were genius kids. You know what they did, right? They took Peter Parker and said, what if his father was Norman Osborn? And just
and they just kind of like, and it was Norman Osborn type of thing. So his dad just hated the fact that he was always tinkering, ripping apart his stuff, always on his case like crazy. And as Reed Richards getting beat up in school by a bunch of bullies, again, going back to Spider-Man, Kong and Flash Thompson, this time he's getting a swirly Reed Richards by this gang of people that are all on the football team. Same as Spider-Man, right? And then Ben Grimm comes in, he's like, oh, what are you doing? And kind of knocks them all out of the place. And then he brings Reed home and he says, so what happened at school? And I was like, there was a little altercation. And I was like, well, you took care of it, right, Benji? I was like, yeah. So his dad loved Ben and wished that Ben was his son and treated Ben like his son. And then Reed was just kind of off by himself trying to, like, express his genius when he has this little rat sister.
Oh, yeah.
Who's going to rat him out for everything. You're tearing apart Dad's stuff. I'm going to tell. And I was like, no, sis, when I go to the negative zone, you'll be the first that goes with me. And she's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's like, whoa, are we already talking about the different dimensions?
Yep.
Like, is it that early that he's like, yeah, there's another dimension somewhere?
Yeah, and that was in middle school. When he was in the middle school, I think it was a middle school science fair where he made toys disappear into the negative zone, and then all the way at the end when they bring him into the Baxter Building and take him through which the Baxter Building is a big think tank run by Johnny Storm, Dr. Storm.
Dr. Storm. Yep.
So they go and they show him what they've got done, and apparently Reed Richards has completely blown away all these adults. Like, you're years ahead of us, and we've been doing the same stupid thing. Like, we knew about this thing forever, but then we looked in and we saw that your cars were right here, and they're floating right in the middle of the negative zone window that they've got right there.
I think, like, seeing that is like, it's just really cool because, like, it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, hey, Dad, you're wrong, I could do this kind of thing. And like the setup for it, where the storms and the dimension is like, whoa, you're working on this? This is why we're here. Like you're saying, the storytelling is just phenomenal. It's like, oh, a little kid gets beat up, figured out this zone, and this giant $1 million company's like, hey, bro, you need to come here and check this out.
And there's nothing new about the story.
No, it's
but
just...
It really is the same story as Ultimate Spider-Man, but it's so much cleaner and so much more streamlined, and it gives you a different perspective.
They got like
on
a little
too.
bit more characters too,
Yeah.
like different like different personalities going on too, so they can like add on to that Spider-Man story, but kind of change it a lot.
Yeah, and I like when they approach his dad. And his dad's like, oh, you want to send him to a private school?
Yeah.
How much is that going to cost me? Actually, we'll pay you. I was like, how much are we talking here?
Yeah, we see how much of a scumbag Mr. Richards is.
He was not ready for kids. He was Howie.
Yeah.
he was Howie from Rugrats.
Yep, he sure was.
Call back to episode 1. Where only instead of just being a loser his whole life, he was just like, you know what? I'm not going to be a loser. This is when Howie just kind of like turned. He's just like, I'm going to take control of this situation. I'm going to beat my kid. And that's basically what that became.
That's what we got from Reed.
Mm-hmm. And we got a little bit of introduction to Sue Storm and Johnny Storm. I don't think they had any speaking rules in this one.
Not really.
But just the idea that their dad was the one that ran the foundation at the Baxter Building, that tied everything together for me nicely. And it took this universe, which I was struggling to see where they can go new with the universe, into this whole idea of like, no, this is exploration. We're going to the negative zone. We're going to be seeing all this new stuff that can't be covered in the Ultimates. This is going to be covered in X-Men because that's more of like an allegory, racial allegory, and can't be covered in Spider-Man because that's not so science fiction. This one went like, so hard.
Yeah.
And it was great. And this was the same artist that opened up Ultimate X-Men. And man, the difference in the coloring, the difference in the inking, even the difference in the line work. It wasn't so exaggerated. There were some really cartoony parts, but it was done with effect. Especially when the dad was yelling at him that one time. He got his giant sausage finger and the hairy arm sticking off.
I remember that's what a lot of the Ultimate Comics just in general inspired me to do a lot of like different artwork and trying different things, especially like perspective like that. It was really, you got it, you know. He's really was like trying to get that finger like, ugh!
Yep. So with this one, any kind of negatives or any nitpicks that you've got?
Nitpicks? Von Doom.
Von Doom? Was he in it?
I think so, yeah, at the end.
I couldn't remember if Von Doom was in it.
Yeah, he messed up their the whole dimension and everything like that. Like their was that the next issue?
I think that's you're jumping ahead, sir.
I jumped ahead a little bit.
Maybe you are. Maybe he was in there, but he didn't mess up anything.
No,
the issue ended with them.
Seeing the thing. Yeah, you're right.
You can't talk about that.
Nope.
We only talk about the first issues.
We need a.
Are you talking Von Doom or Van Damme?
Van Damme. Sorry.
His name was Van Damme.
His name was Van Damme in this one.
That was kind of lame.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And as long as we're on it, the next arc he had like goat hooves.
Yeah.
And then they completely forgot about that later.
Then they were like, you know what? Let's just forget about that.
We were talking about how much of a headache that Ultimate Marvel Team Up caused for the Ultimate line, but then when you see all the stuff they did in Fantastic Four, and it's just like, and how many different writers they had on that too. So I think that was the thing that really, really pushed it. But how many different times they had to retcon themselves, which within Fantastic Four. Whatever. That happened later. But that one was more of like a black sheep of the Ultimate Family as it went on, which I still liked it. When Mike Carey came on, when Mark Miller came back for a second run, where it's just like, we're going to cross over with a different universe. I'm like, we're finally going to see them cross over with the 616. Oh, you wait. And then it was the Marvel Zombies.
Yeah. And then it was like, wait, huh? What did we just do?
We crossed over with the Zombies universe?
Well, to jump back to my negatives, not that it was a negative, but obviously it's hard to pick it to say that it was like a recycled storyline. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of is, but it also, that's like the nerd thing, That's what, like, later on, it's easy because it's like, later on, that's what makes them, like, Peter Parker and Reed Richards, like, oh yeah, we went through the same
also,
thing.
I don't know
so
if
it's kind of hard, but the only difference was, sorry, I didn't mean to cut
it's okay, it's okay, I was cutting you off. Sorry.
Yeah, the only difference was that his Harry Osborn was a big dude and wanted to help him out. He didn't have an image, So it's kind of like, you got the Peter Parker, you have the Reed Richards, then you have the Ben Grimm and the Harry Osborn, who's like, I can't help you. I could, but I can't. And then you have, like, which one grew up different and which one, You have the loving family and you have the one who doesn't. So it's like, it's the same story, but it kind of sets it apart, It's like, what if kind of thing. And I think that's the only negative about it is that you can kind of see it as, like, people picking, like, it's the same story. Yeah. But also, if you look at it, the bigger picture is like, it's the same story, but he did it differently, and
And if you look at the really bigger picture, Reed Richards in the Ultimate Universe was the ultimate bad guy. He turned into the biggest sleazebag and altered reality. He was one of the main villains in Hickman's Avengers run, and he was the guy that started, like, Secret War.
All that whole thing.
And that turn with Reed Richards, going back and reading this first issue, knowing that he was going to be a major bad guy later on, which I don't think was planned.
No.
It couldn't have been planned, because when you read through the series, there's no way he's a bad guy. But when you look at the first issue, you see that they totally set up this whole thing, and I feel like Bendis, when he wrote the Ultimate Doomsday series, he's like, we missed an opportunity.
Oh, yeah, the Ultimate Doomsday series.
Reed should have been a bad guy from Jump Street. Mm-hmm. Like, he should have been like this kid who just grew up with all this repression and went for it. And that idea seated right there, if I'm just taking that one issue and knowing where he ends up, it is so good.
It makes so much sense. It is so good.
Now, as far as nitpicks go from me, again, I'll go back to the standard thing. I'll call that a nitpick, but I think that's just showing the duality of the Marvel Ultimate Universe.
It's like a positive negative.
I think the biggest thing that I saw was when Willie Lumpkin was introduced. And Willie Lumpkin, he's like the Fantastic Four's mailman. Yeah. And I kept going back. I was like, if I never knew that Willie Lumpkin was their mailman, would I have been fussy about his appearance in this one, where he's like this beret wearing, just like, I'm going to recruit you. He's like a college recruiter type of thing for the think tank, where he just takes kids out of science fairs and pulls them into the think tank and they do their stuff. But his name is Lumpkin. So you see this guy that you're supposed to take seriously, and he's wearing this beret, and he's got this goofy mustache, and they're like, you there, Lumpkin? I was like, yeah, I'm there. Wow. I'm going to go ahead and talk to the parents, and we're coming back. And he's supposed to be this really serious character, and it was just a very tonal dissonance to me.
Because it was like, everything's all serious, and then you're like...
I feel like they really should have just created a new character for that one, because I was getting the giggles.
Yeah.
Just watching, I was like, no, Lumpkin, no. And even if I forgot the fact that he was the mailman, his name was Lumpkin.
Lumpkin.
You couldn't have chosen something better for that. So that wraps up everything that we're going for the Ultimate Best of the First. We had the first issues of the first 5 series that were released on the Ultimate Marvel banner. We've got Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Fantastic Four, The Ultimates, and Ultimate Marvel 2. Which one do you, Ray, think was the best of the firsts?
It's hard. I think we've had this conversation where it's like, it's so hard.
I think we're both thinking the same thing, but we're going to come up with a different answer for this.
It's so hard because they're all so great, and especially judging them by the first issues and knowing where they go. For me, in my heart, it's Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Just because even though it's been done before, the way it was done was definitely a breath of fresh air, and it was very relatable for me.
Yeah, it set the tone.
Yeah, like you were just like, even though we all got picked on, but it's exactly what you're saying, like the tone of it, everything, it just set it up for me.
And it was so strong, so much so that when you go to read Ultimate FF, you're like, this doesn't read quite like an Ultimate comic.
And it's like what we were saying, like it's the first one. First of all, it's the first. It's actually the first.
The actual first.
You can already tell with that, like them setting it up. It's like we were talking about, like little things like the background talking. And like no thought bubbles, and you feel like you're being drawn in. You're Peter Parker, and he's hearing this, and you're eavesdropping while you're reading, and that's what really brought me into it. You know, I mean, I was always a fan of Spider-Man. At first, I thought I was a fan of X-Men more than Spider-Man, but this is what really brought me in was Spider-Man. I mean, I'm
gonna have to agree with you 100%, but I'm gonna go with Ultimate Fantastic Four. On this one. And let me say, this was tough. This was really tough.
Now, I remember when we were talking, I was like, Ultimate Fantastic, and I forgot. And I was like, oh my goodness. And because in my head, you think the 3. Mm-hmm. But number 4.
There's the Forgotten series, too, like no one read it.
Yeah. You forget about it. And that's why, even as we're doing this, I was like, all right, so, and then you're like, Ultimate Fantastic Four, I'm like, oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. It was a really good, just they took everything that they did formulaically with Ultimate Spider-Man. Usually I'm not a fan of playing with the same formula, but they altered it in just the right ways. It was very conscious, like, we're going to make him the opposite Spider-Man. So we're going to make sure that he basically has the same origin, but it's going to grow up in a really bad house. Yeah. And he's going to be way more science fiction oriented and stuff like that.
He's going to be a science fictional Eddie Brock, pretty much.
Yeah, he's going to be like just this super genius, whereas Peter Parker's a relatable genius. And it just introducing everything. There was no bad guy introduced in this. There was no antagonist aside from the dad. There wasn't even like so much like a feel for the team because Sue and Johnny were just kind of introduced in a character. There. I mean, in a panel. But the whole thing like gave me such a sense of wonder for where this was going. And that reveal at the end when you see the cars floating inside the negative zone, I felt was the strongest final panel. And I wanted to jump at it. It was like almost Spielbergian. When you watch a Spielberg film and you get filled with that, like, all right, this is really giving me wonder. It got that sense of the fantastic that Fantastic Four should always be about, and really put it in there in a way that felt like it was believable and lived in this one. My second runner-up would be the Ultimates, actually. The Ultimates. Yeah, there's something about Ultimate Spider-Man, going back to it, where I think the drug PSA-ness kind of stepped in front of me a little bit. And then there was some Bendis dialogue that I think was a little too Bendis-y. But yeah, I think that set the tone. Ultimates picked that up, and they made it just this badass action movie. And then Fantastic Four was just like, okay, so we've got our own tone right here. And it's just nothing but pure wonder from what I saw from it. So, Ray, you're going with Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm going with Ultimate Fantastic Four.
It's my heart. I mean, I know we're doing it first, but it's like I know where we're going with it, and it started it. And to me, it's like if it wasn't, we wouldn't be without it.
Yeah, and even though we both chose different comics, they're kind of the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say technically we both picked the nerd. How about that? Which was the best one? The one with the bully nerd story.
Now, obviously. If the Ultimates, if that was the issue where Captain America pointed to his head and said, "Does this A stands for France?" I probably would have jumped.
We would have picked that one.
All right, guys. So that will do it for this episode of the Ultimate Best of the First. If you have any differing opinions, don't be afraid to pop a comment down because we would love to see what you're thinking about. And honestly, Ray and I, we can easily go on talking for another 2 hours straight on all this stuff. So please, debate us. All right? So next time when we come out, did you happen to see that Godzilla teaser image that was just released?
Chubby Godzilla?
Chubby Godzilla?
Chubbyzilla is what I call him.
Chubzillas?
Chubzilla.
Puking at the sky.
But hey, it still looks awesome as hell to me.
He does look really awesome. Now, that has reignited my love for all these monster movies. And I was talking with Ray. I was like, Ray, we got to do a Godzilla King Kong episode. And before I even finished it, he was like, sold.
Yeah. He was like, no, stop talking. Yes.
Yeah, he put his finger to my lips. You're like, shh. Stop. Save it for the pod. So when we come back next time, we're going to do a best of the first movies in the Godzilla and King Kong series. So we're going back to square one and seeing which giant monster, East meets West, is the best of the first. In the meantime, my name is Nick,
My name is Ray.
and we'll see you on the flip side. Good night, and Feliz Navidad.